Thanks everyone for joining. This is the first in our series of, as part of the new generative Gen AI Center at UT. We have the AI and Healthcare Virtual Talk Series, so we'll have a few more of these during the semester. We're really excited to have Vivek Natarajan kick off the series with how LLMs might help scale world-class healthcare to everyone. Vivek is a research scientist at Google, and he's leading research at the intersection of large language models and biomedicine. And he's worked on some of the foundation models, including MedPalm and MedPalm-2, which have passed the US medical license exam questions. So that work has been pretty well featured in Nature, as well as in Scientific American, Wall Street Journal, The Economist, Stat News, etc. More recently, they've showed that MedPalm can be used as a generalist biomedical AI system, which has surpassed primary care physicians on multiple different metrics. So it's kind of an exciting time for the use of LLMs in this space. And I believe, Vivek, that you also received your master's from UT Austin. Is that
Yes,
right?
that is correct.
Right. So we're happy to welcome you back to UT, and I'll let you take it from here. We have the floor until 1:30 Central, so 25 minutes. Thanks so much.
Okay. Thank you so much again for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and honor to be back at UT Austin, where I was a student almost a decade back right now, but I have great memories. So yeah, maybe I can start off by saying like what motivated me to do the work that I'm doing today at Google. And so I grew up in India, and in parts of the country that I grew up in, for many people, going to see a doctor was often not an option. So it often meant like walking 30-40 miles in extreme heat, or giving up on a day's wages, or going without food. And so I knew people who had not seen a doctor in their entire lifetimes. And so this kind of always bothered me, and I always wanted to do something about it. And so even when I was doing my undergrad, just before my master's days in UT Austin, a few friends and we were building this app called Ask the Doctor Anytime, Anywhere. And the name is very descriptive, and it kind of tells us what we were trying to do. But unfortunately, the tech and AI needed for such a thing to work was not necessarily ready at that point of time. But fast forward a decade, and I am pleased to say that the arc of progress in tech, and especially in AI, I think it allows us to dream of this future, and this future where world-class medical expertise is available to everyone, everywhere, at their fingertips. And so I'm sure everyone in this call would have played around with LLMs like GPT-4, and I hope some of you have played around with Gemini as well. And contrary to some of the reports, it's actually pretty good. So I think what we have with these systems is these are very strong general purpose intelligence substrates. And so these models are what I like to call often like a very smart friend of yours, like a friend who has an IQ 150 or above. And so you can talk to these models about physics and poetry and philosophy and maybe even politics if they have not been nerfed. But when you have like a medical concern or need medical advice, do you go to this smart friend of yours? I really hope not. I think you would go to a doctor, right? Someone who has undergone rigorous training and is licensed to practice medicine. And so if we were to use AI in healthcare, why should it be any different? We would want to use specialized models that have been built from the ground up by not just AI researchers, but also clinical people with clinical backgrounds and expertise, giving the right kind of inputs, the right kind of problem formulation. And you want models that are trained on high quality medical data, and you want models that are aligned to the values of medicine and rigorously verified and validated for use in the safety critical domain. And so in many ways, this is exactly what we have been doing at Google for several years now, but especially over the last couple of years with the advent of the new, large language models era. And so what we like to say is we've been basically sending these LLMs and foundation AI systems to medical school. And so, we briefly talked about MedPalm. And so with our work on MedPalm and MedPalm 2, which was published in Nature last year, what we showed was that specialized language models they could attain expert level, when I say expert, I mean expert physician level performance in medical question answering. And so not only were these models actually good on multiple choice medical exam kind of questions, but perhaps more impressively, what you see over here is they were actually also doing well on nuanced and long form question answering. And they were actually surpassing physician written answers on several clinically important axes such as factuality, reasoning, harm, and bias. And so that was kind of exciting to us. But as you would all recognize, medicine is an inherently multimodal discipline. And so we then proceeded to add multimodal capabilities to MedPalm. And so with this new MedPalm M system, this is capable of not only language-based interactions, but it can also interpret medical images. It can chat with you about them. It can ground its responses in the context of a medical record. It can also do things like write radiology reports competently, and also interpret new interesting modalities of data that are increasingly coming online and becoming more and more available and easier to access, such as genomic sequencing data. So that was more on the research side of things. But the applications of these systems are not just restricted to like clinical kind of applications. And so we thought, why not look at more fundamental biomedical discovery kind of things? And so here in another preprint in collaboration with Stanford, what we showed was that you could use LLMs such as MedPalm2 and use them to generate hypotheses regarding causative gene factors for different phenotypes. And so what ended up happening in this preprint was that we had a MedPalm2 generated hypothesis. It in turn led to the development of a novel biogenic model for hearing loss in mice, and this is now being experimentally verified in wet lab settings. And so it's kind of a fun demonstration of how LLMs might not only impact clinical medicine, but might also accelerate biomedical discovery and scientific endeavors.
Something else, he puts the video saying, and I quote, "This is reality television. It's meant to entertain you, and that's exactly what we're."
Yeah, so sorry about that. Yeah, and so obviously all the work over the last year that we've done, it has received a lot of attention. But we at Google believe in not only like bold innovation, but also very responsible innovation as well. And so over the last several months, we've been working with some of the biggest care delivery and life sciences organizations, as well as with many academic and research partners to understand the use cases of these LLM systems, but also understand the failure modes and limitations, and using the feedback to improve. And I would say we're quite happy with the progress that we have made. And late last year in December, we made the MedPalm family of models generally available in the US via Google Cloud as MedLM. And so that's the arc of development and progress around medically tuned LLM. And I think MedPalm is generally a very useful medical language model. However, one thing that it was not actually optimized for is diagnostic reasoning and dialogue. And so AI systems that are capable of diagnostic dialogue could greatly increase accessibility, availability, quality, and consistency of care, as I just alluded to in the beginning of the talk. But however, building such systems, I would say, has been a long-standing grand challenge for the field dating back several decades. But I'm very pleased to say that with our latest work on the system that we call AMI, or Articulate Medical Intelligence Explorer, we've, I think, made significant progress towards this goal. And so what we did was that we built up the system over the last several months, and we conducted a double-blind randomized study. And we had validated patient actors interacting with AMI or both certified primary care physicians via a text chat interface. And so these consultations were designed to mimic what is commonly used in medical schools. It's called objective structured clinical examinations. And so this is more in the style of a virtual OSCE. It's not in person, but it is a very useful construct to use over here. And so in this study, what we found was that AMI outperformed physicians on multiple different axes. And so these included not just clinically relevant axes such as diagnostic accuracy, or like treatment escalation recommendations or management reasoning, but also things around like how well was a relationship fostered with the patient, whether Amy was building up a rapport, was it perceived to be honest, was it perceived to be empathic. And so we thought, I mean, that was actually quite cool. The fact that it was not only doing well on clinically relevant axes, but also perhaps more profoundly on axes related to like things like empathy. And so that was the results of the study. But if I were to go back a little bit under the hood and how the system was developed, I'm actually quite excited about how we went about doing this. And so there's actually no substitute to experience in medicine. And so my co-research lead at Google, Alan, he often says that if you have choice between two doctors, go to the one with more gray hair. And so you can't really substitute that. However, if you were to think about human doctors in practice, they're only likely to see tens of thousands of patient cases in their entire lifetimes, and that is if they are very, very prolific and not slacking. And that number is probably far, far less for medical trainees and early career physicians. But with all the advances in generative AI, what it means is that we can actually train AI systems in simulation on several orders of magnitude more cases. And this in turn potentially provides a pathway for us towards superhuman diagnostic performance. And so in particular for Amy, what we designed was a self-play based multi-agent diagnostic dialogue learning environment with automated feedback mechanisms. And this approach over here is heavily inspired by Google DeepMind breakthroughs over the years, such as AlphaGo and AlphaStar, and even elements of AlphaFold. And so what we had is that we had Amy interacting with a simulated patient, and in turn, that conversation is supervised by a moderator and receiving feedback from a critic. But the cool thing about this is all of these characters or roles are all played by Amy over here. So it's a true multi-agent system. And so this environment in turn allowed Amy to experience simulated patients, not only covering a wide range of diseases and symptom presentations, but also perhaps more importantly things like medical history, what medications that they were taking, socioeconomic statuses, and even things like personality. And so what happens is with every iteration of this self-play loop, we create and curate a lot of synthetic and simulated conversations, and we reuse that to fine-tune the system. And so as you do these iterations, Amy becomes better and better, not only as a doctor agent, but also at playing patient and acting as a critique. And thereby this creates this virtuous self-improving cycle. And so I believe that this simulated learning process was actually the key reason behind Amy's impressive performance in the randomized OSCE study that I just showed in the previous slide. And so in this figure over here, you would see that the red circle, which denotes Amy's performance on all the different axes, with every round of self-play, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and better and better. And so that's what's really happening under the hood over here. So that was more on the dialogue side of things. But in parallel, we've also been looking at what is the assistive potential of Amy for clinicians in solving complex diagnostic cases. And so in another study, what we did was we took these complex diagnostic challenges that have been put out by the New England Journal of Medicine for I think over 100 years right now. And so they have these case challenges, which has a bunch of information about the case with a lot of details. But it also has, some more multimodal information, such as, some of the imaging that was done, or information about, the lab records or tests that were performed. And so all of this is curated and presented. And what happens is, I think these challenges come out weekly, and doctors from around the world come together and participate in this poll, and they try to come up with the diagnosis over here. And then I think at the end of the week or something like that, they release the golden ground truth over here. So these are some perhaps, I would say, not very typical of what you see in regular practice. These are highly challenging. And also the other thing over here is these have been really, really well curated. So the presentation of data is very, very pristine over here. But it gives us a good testing environment to evaluate, if we had regular doctors trying to solve these cases, whether we could, if they had access to a system, an LLM like Amy, would their performance improve? And so we again conducted another randomized study. And here we had an interface like this, where the case was presented in the interface, and Amy could come up with the differential diagnosis, and the doctor could then go ahead and ask follow-up questions. And then at the end of the interaction, they would come up with a differential diagnosis list themselves. And in the study, we had 4 different arms. So we were interested in exploring the assistive effect of an LLM. And so we had an arm corresponding to that. But we also had other arms corresponding to clinicians not having any kind of assistance, or clinicians having assistance to regular tools that they use in practice, such as Google search or other books or resources that they might regularly use. And they were asked to complete and come up with a differential diagnosis list in about 20 minutes, which I think is kind of sufficient time over here. So that's the setting of the study over here. And what we found was that, again, there is significant assistive potential of uh, LLMs like Amy that clinicians can chat with and collaboratively work together to solve diagnostic puzzles and challenges. So over here with the blue line, you see the performance of a clinician unassisted on these complex diagnostic challenges. And you can see that the accuracy over here is quite low because indeed they are quite complex, and general practitioners are not going to encounter them in their real clinical practice. But when they had access to a tool such as Google Search, naturally their performance improved. But perhaps more impressively, when they had access to an LLM like Amy, their performance improved even more. And so you see that with the yellow line over here. But perhaps, and this has been, I think, noted by many, many people, is that Amy alone on these challenges actually performs the best. I honestly wouldn't read too much into this because doctors are not used to encountering such cases. And it is maybe and then the fact that these are really, really challenging and these are the long tail. um, for me personally, it is not surprising that LLMs are getting to the stages when they are getting better. But I think taking a step back, what it kind of tells us is the standard of care. It should perhaps no longer be a doctor alone. It should be a doctor assisted by an LLM such as Amy. So again, the work that we did with Amy, it came out in a couple of preprints over like in December last year and then January this year. And again, it has received a lot of attention and a lot of praise from many experts in the community. But again, when such a powerful technology comes to fruition, there's a lot of questions around it. Questions around safety, like how do we responsibly deploy these systems in safety critical settings such as healthcare, things around trust, how do we build up trust both in patients and clinicians towards AI, things around equity and making sure that we don't amplify existing disparities, and also things around how the product is structured, how the user interface looks like, how the user experience is like. And perhaps most importantly, like how do systems such as LLMs such as Amy, which can be thought of as medical devices, how do we verify and validate them and make sure that they are um, approved for use by regulatory agencies across the world. So there's a bunch of different considerations over here. But I am sure that we as a society will be able to grapple with it and come up with the right set of answers because the potential is clearly undeniable over here. And then taking a step back, what is the future? What is the North Star vision with all of this? And as I alluded to in the beginning of the talk, the North Star vision really is like an AI co-doctor that is a trusted aid to millions of clinicians and in the pocket of billions of people worldwide, democratizing access to medical expertise and medical care. But I actually think, in the process of building this system, in the process of, encoding and bringing together all data elements from the biomedical universe, the system that we are going to engineer and create is more of like an AI co-scientist. So we had, famous physicians like Jonas Salk, Alexander Fleming. They used to practice clinical medicine during the day, and then come back at night and use the insights that they developed to, create medicines such as penicillin and the vaccines that Jonas Salk created. And I think it's going to be something very, very similar. So the system that we are going to engineer is not only going to help us democratize access to medical expertise, but it is also going to help us improve our understanding of biology, design better therapies, ease the burden of diseases, and overall really help us scale, personalized medicine to everyone worldwide. And so really that is what we are building towards. I do believe that there's going to be perhaps no other field where AI's impact is going to be more profound than in biomedicine. And I am really, really excited about the future, and I think it can't wait. And so I will stop over here and take any more questions.